here today speaking with Sean Hutchinson. He is a managing partner with FortunatoHutchinson. Sean, welcome.
Thank you.
If you could please give us a brief overview of you and your firm.
We are middle market investment bankers. We do both sell side and buy side work with a lot of recapitalizations. So primarily we're working with family owned businesses that are between 10 and 50 million in revenue. They've been in business for a long time. Well established, very good businesses. No distress, no turnaround, right? So we don't like deals with hair on them. And our clients really on the other side are private equity groups that are looking for platform acquisitions.
Okay, great. And I'd like to talk to you today about a recent transaction. If you can give us an overview of a recently closed deal.
Sure. Niche manufacturing company located in the Bay Area, about 60 million in revenue, one owner. He founded the company 22 years ago, I want to say. Went through the downturn in 2010 and 11. He made an interesting decision at that point. He reasoned that his balance sheet was stronger than his competitors, so he didn't pull his horns in. He decided that he was going to double his manufacturing capacity and wait for the market to return, and he would be in a position to take manufacturing clients from these other weaker competitors. So he did that. He added a second site that runs, 3 times as productively as the first site that he'd had. He's got about 250 employees.
Wow.
Terrific manufacturing mind, can solve almost any problem that he's up against. But he was, at the point where he spends 4 months a year in Hawaii, and his business really kind of, runs itself. He's got a great management team. So it was a perfect deal for a private equity group that's looking for a platform where, they can then, because of his additional capacity and know-how, they can tuck in other businesses. We identified 6 additional acquisitions that could be made right away. That was just a good example of a good, strong deal with a lot of upside with an entrepreneurial owner who was ready to remain involved or step out of the way depending on what the plan was going forward.
And what was your exact role in this deal?
My role was to advise the seller. So we always work, we're licensed investment bankers. We go through, all of our deals go through a broker-dealer. So there are a series of steps that we really have to go through in order to get a deal ready, because we have to live by the doctrine of reasonable investigation, right? So we do reverse due diligence on all of our clients. We prepare them by basically going through the same process with them as though we are the private equity investor. And what that does is it helps the owner understand what they are about to go through. I don't think any owner that's that hasn't actually been through this process understands how intensive and intrusive that process will be for them. And so, I would probably 80 to 90% of deals just don't survive the due diligence process. The owner may not be ready, the business may not be ready, the team may not be ready for whatever reason. Part of it is because they don't know what to expect. So we can get them ready for that. The business obviously improves, its chances of closing are improved. And I think the advantage for the private equity groups is they don't have as much dead deal costs. They know that deal is well prepared. I've talked to many private equity folks here at the conference who say, looked at 1,000 deals last year, did one. That's not a sustainable business model. And it's not all their fault. The advisors on the sell side need to do a better job of getting deals ready for true transaction PE-worthy status, right? Then we can reduce their dead deal cost on the PE side dramatically, I think, and increase the closing ratio, I guess, for owners who are interested in transacting.
And Sean, how did you source this deal?
It was through another advisor that's worked as a consultant. He's a 70-year-old guy who's been in the business a long time. He just consults with them. He's a good friend of mine, and he came to me and said, I think the guy's ready. I think now's the time. We've been talking about it for 2 years. We've done a lot of work on the business. Would you be willing to step in?
Great. And can you tell us about some of the other parties that were involved in this transaction and how you were able to collaborate with them?
Well, it's always a multidisciplinary process. If you really look at all the parties that have to be involved in a owner-driven sort of family-owned business transaction, it's not just the buyer and the seller or their advisors, right? It's everything from family wealth advisors to the accountant that's been working with the business for 20 years or whatever it might be, to the insurance professional who might be involved in, if it's a partnership, a buy-sell type funding arrangement, to the family members themselves. There's a number of different professional and personal stakeholders in the process. if you are not aware of how they all interact and sort of contribute to the dynamic, then you're missing opportunities and you're missing pieces of what's actually going on. You have to remember that, you know, if you're not talking to an owner about life after business as the transaction is being prepared, as they're coming up to that point, they're not going to understand if they haven't handled those identity issues as they go through this, then they're likely to get cold feet at the last minute. So you have to be talking about this whole spectrum of issues, and there are a lot of advisors at the table, legal and otherwise, that have to be not only there, but aware of all of this that's going on. You know, family businesses are different than any other kind of business. It's not the same. So you really have to appreciate the family enterprise and the way that it operates to be successful.
Definitely. And do you personally ever have to bring in other parties yourself?
You mean co-advisors?
Sure.
We love co-advising, as a matter of fact. Yeah, I think it's a very effective way to do a good job for the client. We certainly don't know it all. We run into special situations often that we haven't dealt with before. I actually have a marriage and family therapist on call who specializes in family-owned businesses, because you run into all sorts of things where I feel like I'd be in on over my head if I see that kind of dysfunction. And you know, that kind of dysfunction in the family, or whatever happens to be going on, first of all, it presents a barrier to success. But you know, I don't want to be in over my head and giving advice on these issues when I don't really know anything about it. So again, yes, we call in other people, and we learn from those situations in valuable ways. It improves our practice. We're able to fold those best practices into our business and just continue to learn and do a better job for subsequent clients.
And can you tell us what the most challenging aspect of this transaction was?
The most challenging aspect was that there was a customer concentration problem in this business. Now, when you dug down into it, it really wasn't as challenging or risky as you would think on the surface. But this particular manufacturing business is a contract manufacturer, so their client is a big company, investment grade, very well known in their industry, but they represent over 50% of the revenues of the manufacturing company. So I think anybody sort of, you know, seeing that on paper would say, well, you know, we're really going to have to take a closer look. When they do take a closer look, what they see is a company that's been doing business with them for 20 years, that is really embedded in the relationship, very sticky. They're certainly not going to go out of business. They're the major player in their particular vertical. And they view the manufacturing partner as a solutions partner rather than just a contract manufacturer. So the risk, you could sort of suck the risk out of that. It could be de-risked, but everybody that took a look at the deal had concerns about that, understandably, until they dug down into it. That was probably the most challenging deal. The structuring wasn't difficult. Getting the transaction done, we had a motivated owner. It's very flexible. You know, you look for those things as you're sort of determining whether you're going to work on it.
Sure.
And all the other pieces of it were well aligned, I think, for success.
Great. And one last question for you, Sean. Are there any interesting takeaways or any lessons learned from this deal?
What I learned from the deal is that the private equity world is really hungry right now for deal flow. What my concern for them is that I see multiples, valuations being generated on these deals in a competitive environment. And to a certain extent, I wouldn't say that it feels desperate to me, that kind of, we're a PE group and we're having trouble getting money out the door, and so we really need to do a deal, so we're willing to pay more for the business than it's probably worth. My concern is that always sort of snaps back on the industry, because ultimately the limited partners aren't going to get what they wanted out of the returns because the going in value was just too high. Or it places more pressure on the management team to overperform in the future, which can stress the business itself. They may have to do things and make decisions in that environment that just didn't make sense for that particular business. So I don't think it's a good, I understand the challenges, but I actually hadn't realized until we got into this transaction just exactly how competitive it was right now, or is right now, and some of the challenges that the private equity partners are really facing. It gave me a new appreciation. It really, helped us understand how we might be able to help them more, and it opened lines of communication that I think are really valuable.
That's very great insight, Sean. Well,
Sure.
Thank you so much for sitting down and taking the time to talk with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.